Patrick has to
Patrick said no. Patrick said no
has
to
to
the
get over
cinnamon.
I got it right here. I'm ready.
But you have it.
I got it.
Yeah. We all
Okay.
have same.
Will this be the first time you've had this, Patrick?
Yes.
Oh, then let's do this one.
Yeah. Okay, let me go grab mine.
An
Mine's in the refrigerator.
inaugural. Okay. Oh, that was smart.
Mine is warm.
You're listening to the Janchi Show, hosted by 3 Korean American adoptees diving headfirst into what it means to be adopted, Korean, American, and more. And now, here's your hosts, Nathan, Patrick, and KJ.
Welcome back, Janchi people, to the Janchi Show. It is your boys, KJ, Nathan, and Patrick. We are here and excited for this next episode, and Patrick is on the road. So, Patrick, don't say anything because we don't want you to die.
Eyes on the road, Patrick.
I think classically we all know that talking while driving leads to death. So, you
But
take it easy.
Yeah, there's actually no law, though, about podcasting while driving, so you're fine. Okay.
We found the loophole, everyone.
It's hands-free.
That's awesome. Well, since we found the loophole, Patrick, why don't you tell the people what Janchi means?
So Janchi means...
Patrick, stop looking
Yeah,
at us.
don't you
Keep your
have
eyes
to
on
look
the
at
road.
us. It's a podcast. Don't look at us.
I didn't even look at you once. I was starting to talk. I was looking at the road.
You're wearing those big sunglasses. We can't tell.
That's true. That's a good point. So Janchi means to feast or celebrate, specifically in the sense of coming together as family and as friends at the end of a week or to celebrate an annual something. And that's what we do. That's the ethos of this show. We celebrate our own individual journeys as well as our shared heritages, cultures, and identities. So that is my take on it. Back to you, KJ.
All right.
How's the weather
that was
out
Patrick. Yeah, that was Patrick in the field. We wish him
About
safe
90%
travels.
humidity out here in Indianapolis on 65. Pretty sunny, nary a cloud in the sky. So, oh my gosh, there's a huge crash and pile up there on the front of the freeway.
You'll see along I-5 that there's a 7-car pileup and the traffic is stopped for miles behind. Does I-5 go through Indianapolis? Did I just make that up?
It does not. It only goes through California. Pretty sure. Oh, wait, no.
It can't.
Is that the 8?
It can't only
Is that
go
the 8?
through.
That's it, or that's in Indiana. That's the north-south Indiana. Then
Anyways, welcome
70
to
and
Traffic
This is
74.
the most random intro ever.
Traffic talk and infrastructure talk
Goodness.
with the Janchi Boys.
That's perfect. That's perfect.
We have a really fantastic interview coming up, and we're so excited about it. But for the time warpers out there, this is our last intro right before we meet in person. So just really briefly, Nathan, how are you feeling about our upcoming and also already happened live show in LA and meeting each other for the first time?
I am super excited, and I can't wait to meet you guys, shake your hand, see how tall you are.
See how tall we
Oh, yeah, that's going to be a
fun.
thing that we're
Yeah,
going to
it
be
is.
talking about a bunch.
Patrick's
because I've
gonna be
already
very-
realized that I'm much taller than
Yeah.
most people in our community, I think.
No, you're the mythic. You're like the legendary 5'12".
It honestly makes me
Asian.
feel weird. It kind of
It's
makes me feel
amazing.
othered. It kind of makes me feel othered. I felt like a little bit like that when at my last meeting with some people in person. I felt weird that I was so tall. Like it made me feel kind of out of place. But it's
Well, how
fine.
do you think Yao Ming feels?
Yeah.
I mean, the same or similar. I feel like he's been living at 7'5" for a long time. I think he's okay.
Well, just keep your heels at home, and we'll be good. So
Well, I need those to walk though. Oh, you mean my
No, he means
heeled
the shoes. Yeah,
Gotcha.
flats only, bro.
I thought you meant to cut my
No
heels,
heels,
off of my feet.
no platforms.
yeah, and KJ and I will wear the special 2-inch shoes that have that extra lift.
I'm gonna need more than 2 inches to get me
2
anywhere
or
close
3
to Patrick.
All right. Well, we heard from Nathan. How are you feeling about it, KJ?
Yes, I am currently feeling very excited, and by the time you're listening to this, I feel really blessed to have met both of the boys in person.
But okay, I heard you say that earlier. That's not true. This is coming out. They will hear this before we've met.
Oh, dang it.
You're saying this for all the people who are retroactively listening to the episode?
Oh, that's
No.
true.
Oh, this comes out
you're right.
tomorrow.
Yeah, it does.
This comes out tomorrow
Oops.
or
All
today.
right. Well, guys, all right.
Scratch.
Never
Oops.
mind.
We did
Redo.
it again. We
I
messed
played
up
with
the
the
show
And
It's
everything's
like, it's all
broken.
okay.
Time loop
We still
Oh,
paradox.
have
baby,
income.
baby.
We all just did our own versions of that
No,
at the same
Patrick
time.
and I did our own versions, and
I'm not,
Oh, I
Nathan
thought
was
I'm
Nathan
not,
was doing it.
I'm not
talking
singing
over
your
it.
Britney
Just
Spears. I'm sorry.
steam rolls through.
That was fun. I like when we do song stuff.
Yeah.
I think for this, so this is technically the first episode of the second year because I subscribed to
Oh.
52, meaning it has been 1 year. So this is our
Sure.
53rd episode. And I
Welcome
think
to year 2.
I think for year 2, we should absolutely have one singing portion or one singing moment every single episode. I think that's a great thing we should incorporate into the show.
That is bold, and we will do our best to make it happen.
We already did.
I'm really excited, and I am excited to hug you. Sarah keeps
Aw.
asking if we're gonna do hugs, and I'm sure that is something on everybody else's
Brothers
mind.
don't shake hands. Brothers got a hug.
Yeah, we go in for that classic bro hug. You go in, arms, pat, 1, 2, 3, break apart. That's how
You do
that's
3
how-
pats?
That's how all bros give hugs.
Oh,
And then
I always do 2.
Nope, that's just what.
No,
what the
I don't
bros
even
do.
pat.
1, 2, 3.
When you start patting, it starts getting awkward.
Why? I think that's just
then
how you
it's-
feel that
I
way.
think the patting is like the I don't really want to hug you kind of a thing.
Nice.
What?
Okay.
Yeah, if
okay.
I do a pat, it's like a one like thud pat and then move on. But if you're patting, then it's like that awkward patting. Like okay, you
Yeah,
can
like,
you can
okay,
let
got
go,
it.
you can let go. Pat, pat, pat. You can
All right.
let
Well,
go.
we got some things to
There you go.
discuss in person.
My take on the patting.
Yeah, that's fine.
So I'm going to be
Patrick,
hugging
how-
Nathan for a solid 30 seconds is what I just heard.
Yeah.
And then
So,
I'll start
there we
patting.
And I'll be staring. I'll be making intense eye contact with Nathan as he's receiving the hug from Patrick.
I'm the king of awkward
Sounds
hugs,
fun.
so don't even worry
Sounds fun.
about it. It's already going to be awkward hug, handshake stuff. It's my MO too. So
Amazing.
Perfect.
Okay.
Get ready.
Patrick, how you feeling about it, man?
I feel pretty good. I'm not going to lie, I'm pretty excited. Wish I was having a little bit more time out in LA, but I think that's just the wanting to get away of it all. But very excited to meet everyone in person, meet you guys in person, meet Jerry, meet everybody that's going to be coming out for the show on Sunday. I don't know. I feel like I've been doing small meetups, like not very many even. And this is like the first time it's going to be a big group of us for me. And I don't know. Somebody asked me the other day if I was nervous at all. And I said, I don't think I'm nervous at all. I think it's like a palpable excitement. So yeah, I'm ready to get out there and I'm ready to see everybody and I'm ready to do all of those things. It's going to be great.
Oh yeah. So speaking of great, we have a great interview with Joy Lieberthal Rho coming up. So we are going to roll that right now.
Run it.
Welcome to the Janchi Show. We are here with our guest today, Joy Lieberthal Rho. Thank you so much for joining us on the show.
I'm delighted to be here. Thank you.
All the way from New York, too.
Yes.
So we are spread out across the country in different time zones. So yes, this is great. We pretty much will start our show as we do with every show. We start to find out a little bit about you and your adoption story, as much or as little as you'd like to share.
Sure. Preface, I'm old. So I came here.
Okay, double preface, Joy. We're not ageist on the show.
We're not ageist on the
Thank you.
show. We've
Thank you.
established that,
I appreciate that. I came to the United States in 1976, and I was almost 6 years old. And I came to the U.S. with another little girl who is my sister. We are not biologically related. We did not go through an agency. At that time, it wasn't required to go through an agency. So we came directly from an orphanage called the Orphans Home of Korea in Ujeongbu, South Korea, near about 40 to 50 miles south of the DMZ. And I also have 2 other sisters who are also adopted from Korea, and they're about 9 years younger than me. And in between the 9 years, I had foster siblings from all over the world, from Vietnam, from the domestic foster care system, from India. So there were a lot of children in our house growing up, always a lot of kids. I always was the oldest, so I took that role very seriously. Adopted into a family in New York, went to school here in New York. I did go back to Korea, and I lived in Korea right after I graduated from undergraduate school. And I went back to my orphanage, and I lived in my orphanage for a year. And I learned how to speak Korean again. And I was also reunited with my birth mother. I had found out that she had been looking for me for 21 years. And we reunited when I was about 24, and we've been in reunion ever since. Probably the gist of the adoption component of my story.
That's great. I did see your Korean adoption story online on Vimeo, and so you mentioned your sister's name is Amy.
Yes.
And so is mine, actually. So I thought that was really cool. We were both also adopted from Korea at different times and are not related biologically, but I thought that was a coincidence. How many kids were living at your home at one time from
Well, yeah, there
adopted?
There've been times like in a summer when there was about 8 or 10 of us.
Wow.
Yeah.
Full house.
So it was a very full house, very busy, very loud, mostly girls. So it's a little unusual for me to be in a space with 3 guys. So this is interesting for me.
I feel like a lot of our guests say that, our female guests. They're like, we've talked about us just being 3 straight men leading the conversations. Like, we got to get some diversity up in here. We gotta get some different perspectives.
I love this. I actually love it. And I think you guys speak to a demographic that is really important. My generation, it's mostly women. And your generation, it's about 50-50. And so I think it's really lovely that the 3 of you found each other and are doing this. It's really cool.
Well, I had a question. So I also watched your profile on Korean American Story, and you had talked about growing up in the household with all of these different all these different kids, and you being the eldest, kind of taking on that role, but also coming up in a non-diverse community. I was wondering, as like you said, taking on this kind of leadership or almost parental role. I was wondering how quickly you knew that was a position, even as a child, that you were going to have to take, and kind of what that experience was like leading a diverse group of kids in a non-diverse community.
Wow. I am impressed with that question, to be honest. I don't think anyone's ever asked me that question. And I've done a lot of conversations. I think I knew early on. I was taking care of my sister when I was in the orphanage. And so we being paired and coming to America at the same time felt like a very organic, natural fit. And that dynamic of me being the 언니 and she being the 동생 never changed over time. And for better or worse, it really enforced every other subsequent kid coming into the family that same dynamic. And so while I actually don't talk a lot about my growing up time in my adoptive family, but with my sisters and with my siblings, I'm pretty open. And I think because that dynamic between Amy and me was so solid, that set the tone for every subsequent kid that came into the home. And like any communal living, you can sense who's got the authority and who has the ear and who has different abilities. You kind of like fit where you need to. And so I think because we were such a strong pair, it set the way all the other kids kind of fell into place. Having said that, that was in our home under our same roof. But out in the world, as far as being in school, it was dog eat dog. We just survived on our own. And I think it's a big misnomer, even in my profession as an adoptee therapist. I see a lot of conversations with adoptees and having siblings that are non-biologically related, but all in the same family. And the idea that like, if there are more kids that are adopted, then we will be able to be of support to each other. But I have not always found that to be true because my story and my lived experience is different than what my sister was going through. And how could I possibly impart any information? We're kind of going through it together and trying to figure it out. I think my younger sisters who are 9 years younger than me benefited from that time difference. So I was in college and I'd be like, this is the way it's going to go, guys. I can give them that warning. But I don't think that that's a luxury that every family always has. So I think that idea of like, well, we're all adopted and we're all Asian, so we have our built-in community. Not really, because we were all kind of floundering on our own. And our view of our outside world was we are a minority, we are foreigners, we are other. And that much we understood, but how to help each other navigate that, not so much.
That was going to be my follow up. Actually, was did you have these conversations together after school? Because you said it was a bond in the home, but once you left, it was really kind of you're on your own in terms of
Yeah.
survival. When you guys came back, it seems like you were still really just figuring out individually. But did you ever have collective conversations about what was going on?
I think it's only happened as we became adults,
That makes sense.
as
Yeah.
we kind of started to see our family as a particular experience. Like when you go to college, you start seeing other families when you go and hang out in other people's houses. And that's when you see, like, oh, those families operate that way, or their relationship with their parents is this. It didn't occur to me to really question any of it until I became an adult on my own. And then as adults, we chose to be with each other. And then we would say, hey, I remember this. Do you remember this? And so that happened more frequently as we got to be adults. Yeah, it's a waiting game, to be honest.
I mean, that makes a lot of sense. Definitely lines up with what I've heard from other adoptees and even in my own experience. My sister and I both adopted from Korea, non biological, 2 years apart in age, 4 years apart in school
Mm,
because of how the birth dates fell. So we never really developed a super tight bond and then never really talked about our own individual experiences in a collective way until we were past college, actually.
right,
So, yeah, I definitely resonate with that.
right.
Well, I'm in my 40s, and I don't think my sister and I have even really talked about it yet. So,
Yeah,
it's one of those things that every family, grows up differently
yeah.
and sees different things and has different experiences. So it's
The
interesting
waiting
to
game.
hear. Yeah,
I mean, what is that metaphor when everyone is blindfolded and they're all touching the elephant and trying to describe what they're touching? And it's
yes.
like no one knows that it's an elephant because one person's touching the tail and one person's touching the foot, and that sometimes that I don't know that metaphor kind of resonates with me. It's like we're all experiencing the same family constellation, same parents, same environment, and yet our lived experiences are so different.
Yeah, we have that book. It's something about all the different parts are individual and don't necessarily tell the story of the whole. I guess
That's
or
right.
something like that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's a good book. And yeah, KJ also. I don't want to speak for him, but he also has a adoptive sister as well.
But I'm
So
going to anyways.
I don't know if you were going to jump in on that one, KJ. I was waiting for you to say something, but yeah.
Yes, I also have a sister who is adopted, but she's from Russia. She's not from Korea, so I think that
Mm,
adds a unique flavor to it. And yeah, the same thing. Like I have this whole podcast that I'm doing, and I don't know that she has listened to an episode or has begun to really think about what it means to be. She probably actually has a stronger sense of what it means to be Asian American than I did growing up. But I don't know if she cares necessarily to explore her ethnicity and ethnic heritage as an Asian Russian, necessarily. So yeah.
So, go ahead, Nathan.
No, go ahead.
Oh, I
I
was
was
just
gonna.
going to ask, growing up in that. So we've talked a little bit about growing up in that dynamic you have with your siblings and being in a non-diverse community. I was just wondering when you specifically were first able to experience a more diverse group of people and cultures and things like that after that time.
I think it was college, which is ironic because I went to a small um, school in Troy, near Albany, New York, and I think it's mostly an undergraduate school, so it was only like $7,000 students. I could count on one hand how many Asians there were,
Wow.
but there was a significant community of African American students. And at the time that I was there, they started they started AFIA, which is a Black fraternity. And um, that became my beacon. They welcomed me in. They educated me on language of race, identity, social justice. they made it very clear, girl, you're not white. Come hang with us. And it was wonderful. It was so, it was very warm. It was very welcoming. Both the men and the women were equally like very welcoming of me, realizing she doesn't really know who she is. She's not like all the other Asian foreign students, and she's definitely not like the white students. We wonder if she actually knows who she is. So I really am very grateful to the Black students at that school. And they inspired me to start my own Asian women's sorority on campus. And I went all in. It was an opportunity for me to really explore my cultural identity in a very safe environment, and was able to cultivate an understanding of other in a way that felt really empowering. But I also recognized the limitations of what they could provide me, which is they're not Asian. And at that time, it was only a few years after the LA riots. And so the students were going through a reckoning of their own about how they feel about the Asian American community and the Korean American community specifically. So there were definitely spaces that I was not welcome in. And so really just understanding that nuance of who am I, and now as a much older adult, really landing in that space of I am a woman of color, and this is what it looks and feels like. And taking ownership of that identity has actually taken a lot longer than I thought, but I am very grateful for the platform and the foundation that the Black students at my undergraduate school gave me.
What was it like starting your own sorority? For having like my own insecurity, I was like, geez, I could not have done that in college if I had just discovered, oh, dip, I'm Asian American. And then
That's what I was
like,
Let's have a meeting,
Yeah,
and then no one shows up, and you're like,
because
oh.
I experienced that a year ago, and
Yeah.
there are people who listen to the show who are like, KJ, we can't wait for like the community group to start in Dallas. I'm like, I'm not ready to take that step yet.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a combination of my personality. I think you've read in my bio, I've started lots of things.
Mhm.
I like creating community. It is the space that I feel most comfortable in that being able to create a space where I can just kind of meld into the background and create this thing for others is one of the biggest sources of joy from me. And so it really became a thing of like, I'm curious, how do you wear a hanbok? I'm curious, how do you do a fan dance? I'm curious on how do you sing this song? And I would just ask people, and they would say, we want to help you. I think being an adoptee stripped any sense of pride I had in my identity. So I was completely humble and said, I want to learn. And there were a couple of international students from Korea who were happy to teach me as much as they possibly wanted to. And so that's how I started it. And I became friends with several women, and I said, hey, what do you think? And they were like, sure, let's try it. Let's meet other Korean women in SUNY Binghamton and see what they have to say, and can they help us? And it was really just each step was an adventure for me to say, well, what more can I learn? Because I knew I wasn't going to learn it at home, I wasn't going to learn it anywhere else, and this was a perfect opportunity. And I don't know why I did it. I can't believe I did that now that I think about it, because like the audacity in me to know that I could choreograph a fan dance all by myself was like, who are you? But I had other girls who were like, well, let's watch a video and let's see if we can do it. And, the audience was mostly white Americans, so they didn't know whether we were doing it right or not.
They're not going to know.
They're not-
They don't know. No one's going to be like, that one move, not really
It's a
traditionally
very slow
Korean,
chicken dance with
So
fans.
the stakes were really low. The approval was not, sought after. It was just an internal pleasure. I was like, I just want to see if I can do it.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of been my approach to everything. But I will also add that I came here when I was 6 years old. So even though I did not embrace my culture growing up, I look at that as an act of protection and survival. But when I was free to explore who I am, I knew I was Korean American. I always knew I was Korean American. I always knew I was Korean. I just didn't know how to be Korean.
Mm.
And so learning that was important.
That's interesting. So you're up there in terms of like how old you were when you were adopted. Like
Yes.
most of the people that we talk to are babies or maybe 2 or 3. Certainly don't have any memories. And so, in the story that you shared on KoreanAmericanStory.org,
Hmm.
and their archival legacy project, right? That you kind of talk about having some of those memories about coming over, and I don't want to rehash that, but I am curious. So we've been going through this book that like teaches us Korean culture in a really fun way, and just from what I have gleaned from the cultural pop psychology of child development, that like having 5 years in Korea, and I think being able to establish yourself and being raised in like that highly Confucianist environment, I'm must have um, been formative in a unique way, right? Where most of us were removed from that environment quicker, and so maybe think of ourselves more as American, and then wrestle with like depending on how we were raised, ethnically Korean, or we just don't talk about it, or whatever. So I'm curious, how did all of those things play, and what were the conversations like for you growing up? With the balance of being adopted versus being Korean, and that the reckoning between those identities of like ethnically you're Korean, and so like this is a culture that we want you to explore, versus like, well, you're adopted, and that's what this means for like our family dynamic, with the added complexity of having foster international and domestic foster children in and out of your home.
So I'll probably say more about my family than need be, but not much. A
Mm,
lot of my exploration was as an adult on my own. Um, and I think also, in fairness, it wasn't something that I wanted to do.
mm,
I was put in Korean language class and language school when I came to America to retain what I had. And I did not like it. I didn't want to be there. I made it very clear I did not want to be there.
yeah.
I was put in first grade a month after I came to the US, and I was
Woof.
determined to speak English. Um, so there was not going to be a lot of will on my part to retain my Korean, to retain my Koreanness at all.
Hmm.
Um, I think where the adoption part comes in is, I wouldn't say it was a healthy approach. I wouldn't recommend it, but that idea of being an orphan was reinforced, and that just became fuel for me. It just became a driving fuel. It became a source of ambition of like, I am going to succeed
Mm.
no matter what.
Well, that makes a lot of sense in the context of when you got to college and had that freedom, and why you just kind of ran with starting this Asian sorority, starting to really just dive into not only your own culture and heritage, but also being accepted by the Black sorority and fraternity and students that were there, and diving into that culture and really immersing yourself. I was going to ask because I again, like those experiences you talked about, those memories and things that you kind of kept internally from your 6 years in Korea. How much did you feel like looking back now? How much did you feel like you were drawing, or either consciously or subconsciously, off of those kind of implicit memories in order to kind of go in the direction that you were going once you got to college? But I think you kind of answered it because you said it was fuel. It was
Yeah,
a type of fuel.
right. My lived memories of Korea was my
Mhm.
orphanage. And so I
Sure.
think any of us who have lived memories of our life in the orphanage want to be as far away from that experience as possible for the rest of our lives.
Right.
And uh, so, yeah, that would be probably a good politically correct answer to that question.
I like the
Nice.
navigation there. I like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And
Thank
then
you.
and then can you explain a little bit? I mean, with the what you've already said makes sense too, that you are just always looking for information and for more um, expansion of your knowledge. What drove you to go to Korea and actually live there?
Yeah. So I did want to go into the Peace Corps actually. And so that I did go through the process of trying to get into the Peace Corps, but this opportunity, I wrote a letter to my orphanage and said, I'd like to come and stay. I'd like to volunteer. And they had never heard, there were only about 25 of us that were adopted from this particular orphanage. And I'm the only one that went back. And they were like, sure. They didn't really know what to do. They have zero expectation of what that would look like at all. And I use the word volunteer very loosely. I think that was a seminal learning experience for me. I'm not sure what the other people got out of that experience. I would say that I have long-term relationships with several of the kids who are now adults, who are now parents, who live in Korea, who have aged out. And I think that's why Glenn Morey's project hit so personal for me in his quest to really get the dichotomy of stories for those of us who are adopted and those who aged out. And so, that year was sure, come and let's see what happens. And I just lived there and I just asked questions and passed the English to Korean English dictionary back and forth, trying to talk to all of the kids and hear their stories. And sure, I tried to teach them English and transliterate a Mariah Carey song or two. And, I
Here's
baked
what I
for
can
them.
bring to the
Yes.
table.
Yeah. I figured out how to bake cookies because at that time at my orphanage, they were still making rice outside in those cast iron with a fire pit, like the
Whoa.
6-year-old girls, 7-year-old
With a
girls knew how to
fire.
make rice from that. And so I was like, let me see if I can make cookies, and so, I think it really was more an experience for me than it was for them.
Mhm.
And it was a wonderful experience just to live the what if. What if I wasn't adopted? I'd still be in this orphanage,
Right.
And yeah, that
Amazing.
was an incredible experience. Yeah.
And then during that time while you were there is when you found out about your biological mother
Yes.
as well. And so that was from a private detective.
That's right.
So can you go over that a little bit? 'Cause that's a fascinating story.
Yeah.
I heard that.
Yeah, I mean, it just so happened that one of my unnies happened to answer the phone instead of the office staff. And I think there were a lot of phone calls, actually. I found out later on that there might have been some reports or an article in the newspaper about an American who came back. But I didn't read the newspaper, so I didn't know. So apparently the orphanage had gotten a lot of phone calls of birth parents coming forward saying, that could be my daughter. Is that my daughter? And one of them was my birth mother.
Wow.
And she was relentless. She called all the time. And it just so happened that somebody else answered the phone. And she was also privy to information that obviously all the other calls were false because she knew that my name had been changed, my birth date had been changed. So again, retroactively, I learned that there was somebody at the orphanage or someone connected to the orphanage who mysteriously wrote her letters over time, just kind of doing updates. So when my parents would send a Christmas card with pictures, they would send an update about what we were doing. So she had little markers of like when I graduated high school and I was dancing ballet and
Interesting.
little things like that. And so whoever it was that took compassion on her desire to connect with me also told her that my name and birth date was changed. So I thought that was interesting because my adoption was so unusual. I don't have any paperwork. I have letters that were correspondence between the director and my parents. And so meeting her feels like there was obviously other people, other winds impacting or influencing that reunion. I did not go to Korea with the intention to find or seek, actually.
Yeah.
So it was her tenacity, really.
Yeah, it's so interesting that you went and that you essentially just stumbled into meeting your birth family.
Yeah.
What a privilege and unique situation. And
I
there are so
know.
many other
It's so
adoptees who
true.
are like work so hard at trying, and just don't hear back. And yeah, I don't think I could ever cease to be amazed by just the diversity in stories and experiences
Yeah,
of CADs. And I haven't even, that's not even looking outside of Korean adoptees, right?
that's right.
Right.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's wild. So I really encourage our listeners to go, and we'll link this in our show notes, but to go and watch Joy, the rest of your story. It's the way that it's told is really moving, and you are so gracious with your vulnerability in telling what that story is like. That's the Korean American Story.org legacy archive project. I don't know, that whole thing. Like I said, it'll be linked in our show notes. But one of the things that you
Yeah.
said
Oh, can I also say
yeah.
I didn't intentionally do this, but I also was interviewed by Glenn in his side by side project.
Oh,
Mhm.
perfect.
And so my intersectionality with Glenn has been one of the most profound relationships to have. One, because I feel like I have an oppa finally. And and so just
No longer the
his,
oldest.
yes, I love his project. And later on I'll be able to tell you more about some of the collaboration that Glenn and I are doing. But
Yeah.
so the full story is KoreanAmericanStory.org and also side by side. I
Good.
had the privilege of being able to share my story twice.
Because
That's
after I
Just also
watched
not
that
common.
one, I was like, oh, I want more. I did because it ended at the end of the story, and I was like, I can't remember exactly. I was like, oh wait, there's so many more things that I was like, I'm sure that could be told and stuff. So now definitely have to watch Glenn's
Mhm.
story of you there, yeah, on side by side. So
Thank you.
um,
Thanks.
one of the things I do remember from your story that you started mentioning that one thing that you had a similar laugh as your mother, and
Mm-hmm.
that you asked your mom about her feet
Mm-hmm.
and the size of her shoe. I thought that was very funny, and those are things that when I first met my biological family that I had very similar feelings for, because I don't know what it is. Maybe it's
You asked
that
about foot size?
biological. Well, it's not the foot size. It's just things like I have a dimple in the back of my ear on both
Okay.
ears. Like
Uh-huh.
I was like, does any of my siblings have dimplings in the back of their ear?
Yes.
I was looking for similarities, biological similarities that I've never seen
Yes.
before, because I've never seen anyone that looked like me.
Right.
And that was some of the first questions I had as well. And we joke on the show a little bit about how when my brother was here visiting, we were walking together in California, and my sister and his wife were walking behind us, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, they walk the same." And
So true.
so we had the similar
Totally.
just
Yeah.
walk, and it was just a funny thing that I'll always remember. And then we look at each other and we're like, "Oh yeah, I guess we're both bow-legged," and we're both like have this thing. So
Yeah.
yeah, I really related to that comment. I thought that was really great that you added that in there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought it was so lovely and just so honest and like deeply human that like I don't know, I didn't know what to ask, and then he was like, what's your foot size? Like that's like I think that there's
such a girl question, right? Can we share shoes was the essence of that question.
Well, that was actually a question that I had, because you talked about having to change out of your clothes to meet your mom, and you were wearing a pair of Doc Martens. And the whole time I was listening to your interview, I was like, when you got to that part of the story, I was like, you should have brought your Doc Martens. I'm like, did you bring
I
your Doc
know.
Martens for your mom to try on, like, to
I
walk around
know.
in? Like, that's
It's so
that's what I was
true.
thinking. That was
Yeah.
funny.
yeah.
But I mean, even now I send her shoes, because I
Oh,
know
that's
it'll
there you
fit.
go. You're like
That's
Oh.
amazing.
Yeah, that's awesome. So one of the phrases that stuck out to me in that interview was in your time volunteering, working with the orphanage, etc. You what I heard you say, and I don't remember verbatim, but like you became Korean, right? And I think that you alluded to this a little bit, right? And that you got to explore some of the what if, right? What if you weren't adopted, and those things. But I'm curious now, if enough time has passed or you had enough conversation, if you can articulate in any form what that threshold looks like for you. Like,
Mm-hmm.
was there a moment, or do you have any of the language? It's like, oh, this is the thing, and I feel Korean, and that means X, Y, and Z. Can you put any language to that, or is it just an abstract, like, I don't know, my heart just told me I was Korean now?
Yeah. So I don't know if I can replicate that feeling from the time I was living in Korea, but to answer your question specifically, I had my first dream in Korean,
Ooh.
and that was maybe 4 or 5 years ago. I've been watching so many Korean dramas. Eventually, it would make it in there. Um, but it was a really interesting dream.
Mm.
And it was clearly just remembering the notes of the dream in that there was a baby that was being diaper changed in a bathroom, but everything was in Korean, and I was speaking in Korean. And the women were speaking in Korean, and I woke up like, wow, it's happened. I have hit the threshold. I have crossed the bridge between English, Korean, Korean, English, and it's flowing in a way that I never, ever anticipated. So the fact that it made it into an actual dream, I felt like, oh, maybe that portal that I had closed tightly for so long was beginning to loosen and open up a little bit. I mean, I have to say that, for an adoptee to learn how to speak Korean is so hard. It's so hard.
Yeah.
And so I think that I have to admit I got some privilege out of it because I was speaking Korean for the first 6 years of my life. It wasn't just baby talk. I was speaking in Korean. I didn't go to school in Korea, but I was very verbose, and so that foundation is in there somewhere in me. And so I know that my ability to kind of learn how to speak, once that portal opened, it grew very quickly, and my comprehension grew very quickly. So I think that would be a moment that I could probably target.
So would it be fair to say that, like, certainly a major marker, not the only marker, but the major marker of Koreanness for you is language, and
Yeah.
that kind of, which makes sense
Yeah.
then, just like having spent so long, a
Yeah.
year in Korea,
Yeah.
and like being so immersed in it, then you were like, oh yeah, that thing broke through. That makes sense.
Right.
I think for me, one of the things I think that I've taken in my own journey and doing the podcast and the exploration with these guys especially is, that kind of the mix of language and culture, and kind of understanding those things side by side. But I think one of the clear markers for me will be not only the ability to speak, but to make jokes in Korean. That I will so understand the culture well enough, and like how Korean friends will think and expect me to be, that then I can make jokes that, that would imply, not necessarily because you don't have to be fluent in a language to make a joke, right? But that would imply a fluency of culture that I think would be an important threshold for me to be like, oh, I've really made it here,
Right.
So yeah, that's interesting. I was just curious if you could explain that. So, kind of continuing in the same thread of identity and thresholds and things. One of the other things that you said in that interview was that you identify as a Korean American adoptee. That those three words are really uniquely tied together, right? And in the interview, you candidly, albeit briefly, wrestle with like, maybe I don't love that adoptee is always attached to Korean American, but it's there nonetheless. Um, so you said something. You said you worked really hard for the identities to be seamless. Um, can you explain more about what seamlessly moving through Korean American adoptee means for you and looks like for you?
I think like your joke, to be able to land a joke in a space that is not just adoptee centric,
Mm,
would be really awesome.
mm,
To be able to sit in a room full of Korean women and understand, oh, they're talking about how to get their kid to college, and they're joking, and they're talking about their partners, and they're swapping drinks and recipes, like that speed in which they're able to switch from subject to subject to subject, instead of me constantly like, what?
mm.
And just going with the conversation, even if I don't say anything at all, I feel like inside I'm doing this like happy dance, like I understand what's happening
Yeah,
here.
Yep.
absolutely.
And also like who's to be able to know who is in kinship with, like which mom is friendlier, which one speaks 반말, which one does 존댓말, which one is like jab, and which one like be able to see that, because
Raise your nunchi level.
right, because language is so intricately connected to culture in Korea, and it's so hierarchical. to listen to who speaks in different ways to each other already gives you indication of proximity that just knowing how the words will never let you know what's going on. Who is more comfortable with my adoption identity and who is not feels really important to me to be able to suss out. And when somebody says, oh, they're so take, they're so kind, are they being kind because I'm a more American and I can give them something?
Right.
Or are they kind because they truly see me as a person, as another mommy that they could talk to?
Mm.
And being able to suss all of that feels like that's the stream of water that flows through really easily.
Yeah.
When that happens, that's very magical. And it doesn't happen often, but it does sometimes.
I can't wait to have that moment. I don't know if it'll ever come for me, but I
Yeah.
love the way you described that.
Manifest it, bro.
Yeah. Yeah.
We've already put it out there in the universe, Patrick. It's
That's
done.
true. That is true.
It's done.
So on this theme of identity, was going to be kind of going off of this question of the seamlessness between the three. I'm wondering, we've talked a lot about, or we talk a lot about on the show, how we as adoptees come to understand ourselves, either as at the racial side of ourselves or the adoptee identity, or even balancing all three of those with or those two with the American identity. When did you start to move in and through adoptee specific spaces that were not or just outside of specifically like Korean spaces? Like, when were you first starting to engage the adoptee community and you realized, oh, this is something that I need to be a part of as well?
So I went to grad school for social work. I knew I wanted to work in adoption. So my first job was the M&B Donaldson Adoption Institute, which then became the Adoption Institute. It's not there anymore. But I believe there was a domestic adoptee also on the team of I think there were only 6 women on the team. And the first conference I went to, first adoption trade conference, if you will, I got to meet all these domestic adoptees that were white adoptees adopted into white families, mixed race adoptees, biracial adoptees adopted into white families or Black families. And none of them were intercountry adoptees. And so I'm listening to them swap stories and talk and seamlessly talk about the last time they saw their birth mother and a letter they got, or can you read this research article I wrote about XYZ and babies in utero and do they understand? It was all these different things, and none of which I had ever thought about. And it was a really wonderful education for me to realize I could get really hung up on my being Asian American adoptee, but actually they already have the formative language. Again, they have the language. They have been talking about this for at least 20 more years than I have. And so just being in that space of just other adoptees was really powerful for me. And the cultural component was it wasn't discussed at all, but the adoption part of it, the feeling other, the feeling of loyalty, the feeling of grief and loss, and making sense of different socioeconomic strata, class issues. I was like, oh yeah, yes, that all resonates with me too, right? Sometimes, that's actually more important to get that part of it in some semblance of order so that we can make room to understand more about the cultural conflicts that happen. So there are times when I'm in spaces and I listen to adoptees talking about their birth parents and it's an intercountry adoptee, I often hear it as a cultural reconciliation conversation and less about an adoption related conversation. And that is partially because my foundation was working and talking among domestic adoptees and realizing, oh, they have the same thing. They just use different language for it.
Pretty amazing. I've never actually thought of it that way as far as the conferences goes. I've always considered Korean adoption conferences as one of my first conferences because I would love to see, similarities in the culture and in the adoption space. But I never thought of it as far as the more connection on the adoption only first and less about the cultural part of it, because that is essentially what I'm looking for, is more about that information. And the cultural stuff is, reading and doing research, learning the language, eating, so I really going to second guess myself now on potentially future conferences for that reason
Mm.
that you just mentioned. So thank you for that. That's something I'm going to have to look into.
Can you share a little bit about the work you've done in the adoptee space since having that first
Mhm.
conference and realizing, okay, I gotta be talking about this, and I went to college for this too, so let's talk
Mhm.
about it. So
Yeah,
what
yeah.
share with us a little bit. I know a little bit about some of the work you've been doing, but tell us a little bit more about all of that and what that experience and journey has been like for you.
So, 1999 was the first International Korean Adoptee Gathering. And 1999 happened to be the year that I was at the Institute. And the Institute was tapped to do a survey of all of the participants. And I got to write the survey because I was
Nice.
an employee there. I was also a founding member of Also Known As, which was the other sponsor, along with Holt International. And so, as a chronology, I was first a member of Also Known As, which was founded by Holly McGinnis. And her one of the interests in creating that organization was to create a mentorship program. And since I was becoming a social worker, I really was keen on the mentorship program. So I said, I'll help you with that part. I really like that idea of giving back to the younger generation and giving role models and other people to be beacons for the future in the adoptee community. And so I was working on creating the mentorship program and also working at the Institute, analyzing the data that came from over 250 participants who filled out the survey. Just so happens it's the first survey that we finally asked the adoptees, what was your lived experience like? And so that was a very foundational part of my education. And then, I stayed connected with Also Known As for many years. It was the side passion project that consumed a lot of my time. All of the founding members, we were very, very deeply involved, but we became our own our own family, really. We became each other's support, and being among, at that time there were about 7 women, all Korean adoptees, and we would hang out, we would do celebrations, and we became like sister friends. Um, and then I worked also at an adoption agency because I really wanted to understand, how did I get here? And so I realized the only way I would understand how I got here was to actually go through the process of understanding the home study, the adoption process. I got it from like a macro level at the Institute, a policy level, but I wanted it like boots on the ground. So I worked at a private adoption agency. I didn't last very long there, I'll be honest. But a position opened up in the post-adoption department where I got to work with the kids once they came home. And I ended up there for about 4 years, and I learned a lot about child development. I learned a lot about institutionalized care, the impact of institutionalization on children. I did a lot of home visits, working with families as they just became newly adopted families and working with the kids. And I realized this is the thing I love the most, is to work with the kids. And so I went back and got more training to become a therapist. And training really just looked like doing a lot of sessions for free, a lot of hours, spending a lot of time with adoptees and helping them navigate and cultivate a story. I feel like, I got to do that through Also Known As, speaking on a lot of panels and speaking in front of a lot of adoptive parents who just wanted to understand my story. And in kind of like creating that narrative, I realized that as an adoptee, I had the privilege of being able to help other adoptees create that narrative. And I often say to my clients, I'm actually just a little bit ahead of you. That's all. I don't know everything about adoption. And what I don't know, I want to explore with you. But I just think of my story and my position in the community as somebody who's just like the word 선생님, somebody just a little ahead of you. And so that was how I've always kind of approach the work that I do. In the work that I did, I realized I was having the same conversations over and over and over again, where adoptees were asking very similar questions and asking, like, am I the only one that thinks this way? And in my head, I'm like cataloging, actually, no, you're like the 60th person. and I
You
realized
can
there's
see
no
my Rolodex.
Yes, yes. I wanted some sort of a resource for the community to kind of start to realize that there are certain themes in our lives. Glenn and I have been talking about the roadmap of the adopted life and different developmental milestones that we hit. And it doesn't really coincide with chronological age. And that's where I'm Adoptee kind of began to be born, was thinking about this. How do I get all this information that's in my head out to the world in a way that is feeling like I see you, I see the journey we're all on, and how do I, as a mental health professional, and my peers who are mental health professionals who get to have these really intimate conversations with adoptees, how do we start creating information, resources, stories, just to help our community begin to formulate what it means to be who we are. So that's my other passion project, is I Am Adoptee. And the other project that I do is a 1-week sleepaway camp for Korean adoptees and American-born Korean kids. And it's called Sejong Camp. It's in New Jersey. It's co-directed with Ben Kim Ozer, who is also a Korean adoptee. And it was originally founded 26 years ago by a white adoptive parent after the LA riots. But it has morphed to really being the full lived experience of what it means to be Korean American, whereby the adoptee is part and parcel integrated within the community of being Korean American. And so now we have adoptees, we have children of adoptees, we have mixed race Korean Americans, we have American-born Korean kids, and we talk about adoption. It's a seamless part of the conversation. Half our counselors are adoptees, half our counselors are American Koreans, and all of our teachers are, again, either Korean adoptees or children of adoptees, and really giving a safe space for a week for kids to really stand strong in their Korean American identity. I think I don't know if you guys realize this or ever experience it. Like, as adoptees, we get fed a lot of information about traditional Korean culture. And what I think I love about your show is you appreciate the tradition, but you're American. And so, what does that mean to live in America as a Korean person, as a Korean body? And that's not the same thing as being able to do a fan dance or follow drumming or do taekwondo. We have a very, very different history here. And so that's the part that I really like being able to capture at camp.
Really quickly, is Sejong Camp named after King Sejong?
Yes, sir.
Nice.
Nice.
Book coming into play.
The
I've
book.
learned one thing on the show. All right.
Well done. Well done.
Well, I could say I really appreciate you saying that about our show, because I think one of the unique things about the show is that not only was it started during the pandemic and we don't know each other, but we really came together because we wanted to explore and celebrate our multiple identities. But we also came together during I really don't know what else to call it, but other than like a severe racial reckoning within this country. And for me personally, this last year was the first time I ever started to think of myself really as an Asian American or as an Asian man or Korean. And then not only that, but then to realize that, I'm an adoptee, a word I'd never heard for 30 years, and trying to figure out how do I even navigate that? Without this show, I don't know if I would have been able to do any of those things. I don't, because the most beautiful thing I think about all of the communities that I've been very privileged to find myself in now over the past year is that I've been very accepted into them. And for 30 years, I felt like I was not accepted anywhere. And I could not find the acceptance that I was really looking for because I didn't know what it was that I was looking for. So for you to say that about the show, I think that really touches me and makes me feel makes me feel good just knowing that, we are exploring it a little bit differently. And I say that because, as listeners of the show will know, I can get very fanboyish of the people that have come before us. Yourself, Glenn, J-Ron, Sujin Pate, people that have laid the foundation. And I think that's something that I've discovered for myself during this time and reading about the history of adoption, specifically intercountry adoption. We're in a renaissance right now of the adoptee voice, adoptees coming out of the woodwork, us three included, to share and tell their story and reclaim all of that. And I think something that I'm hoping to see more of is the acknowledgement of the generations of adoptees that have come here first, who had nothing to build off of, and then built what we are now building off of here. So that was all to say, I've been holding my fanboyness in for the whole interview, and I just wanted to say,
exploding out.
I'm very, this has
For-
just been a
for
really,
me?
yes, this has been a very
wow.
incredible conversation, and I just feel really, really, really honored and humbled that you gave us this time, or you've given us this time so far tonight to have this conversation, because we can't have enough of, I think, the intergenerational conversations where we can really start to come together, and specifically tying it together with Camp Sage, or the Sejong camp, and how you guys have built an all-inclusive community. That's what I want to do. That's something that I am really big on and wanting to be a part of. So to be able to have this conversation,
maybe this podcast needs to come to camp next year.
Heyo. We're trying to find
Sejong.
out where we can go and physical
absolutely.
spaces we can inhabit. So yeah, but that's
think-
all I wanted to say. A long
Thank
way to
you.
say thank you for everything you've done.
Thank you.
Yes.
I really appreciate that. I was nervous to come meet you guys, so thank you. Thank you very much.
I think one of the things that Patrick says, and that I've also, like, as we've been doing this and have had the privilege of meeting adoptees who are newer to the journey, is that there is really a strong sense of filial piety that exists in Korean culture, in Yu-Gi-Oh, but across adoptees. And so, where adoptees feel so isolated and feel uniquely separated from their cultural identity, from their racial identity in America or whoever in the world they happen to be, right? That the people like you and Glenn and Sujin and others become for us, through their writings, through their works, through things like the I Am Adoptee project, cultural oppas and nunas and songtaengnims, right? And then in turn, we have the privilege of then being able to be that ourselves, for whatever. It's like, you can't, like what you said earlier, like, you can't really say the next generation, because somebody could be starting their journey at 60, like Glenn did,
That's
or somebody
right.
could start their journey
Totally.
at 15, and you're like, whoa, you're so far ahead of me, and,
Absolutely.
so it's just like, I don't know. I mean, I have walked the path for some amount of time, and I'm happy to help you for as long as I can.
KJ, you pretty much answered your own question. You had asked me earlier about that seamlessness, right? And I don't know, you guys, I snuck in a lot of Korean words in this conversation, and nobody asked any questions. You all went with it. So, hello, here's the seamless.
Yeah, that's
I hadn't even thought about
that.
Definitely
recognizing the
feel
Korean
more
words that you've thrown
Korean.
out. So, but I didn't even think about that. Thanks to the book. Thank you, Korean
Yeah, I
Culture
know.
Dictionary, for helping me out.
Yeah.
No, I mean I saw each other nod when you said Janumal and Banmal. We all,
Oh yeah, Patrick was very
Yeah,
excited
like,
to learn.
mhm.
He was like, I know those words.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
no, we have learned a lot over these last 6-7 months of doing this podcast, and it is part of our journey to become more Korean as well. And but it's it's pioneers like yourself who have done all this other work too, the projects and stuff, that is why I think Patrick is also fanboying, is because we do want to thank you and others that have been doing it, and yeah, we really appreciate it.
Also, we've been doing the
Thank
show
you.
for 10 months. I don't know
10
where
months
the
now.
6 or 7 is coming from, but
We've been doing this
it's-
show for approximately 1,000 months.
You're right.
Uh-huh,
It is almost
uh-huh.
our 1 year. I should have back
I'm
calculated.
looking to your.
Yeah.
I'm very much looking to your toll. That would be fun. That's gonna be fun to listen to.
Our little Doljanchi will be an interesting event. We're excited about it, but we're also excited to do our eating portion of the food show,
Oh,
which
yes.
is
The
what
food
we
show?
are probably going to move on now. But before we do that, where can people find you? I know you mentioned I Am Adoptee, and I do want to mention that's iamadoptee.org, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
So, yeah, what other places can people find you?
Yeah, my two loves is iamadoptee.org and sejongusa.org. Those are the two organizations. I'm really excited about I Am Adoptee. It is a space that we are trying to impart as much wisdom as we possibly can to help our community better understand their wellness, their mental health. And Glenn and I have created a collaboration. He's very generously joined me in a project that we're ready to launch probably in about a month. So I'm really excited to share with everybody that. Our Instagram handle is I Am Adoptee. So please follow that. And I think we're also on Facebook, but Instagram seems to be the place that a lot of young folks tend to
The Gen
reside
Z, the
these
Gen
days.
Zers are over there.
Yeah.
And TikTok, I guess.
Yes. I'm not TikTok ready at all.
I don't think
TikTok is
think
just
we
so
are
much
either.
like I already feel like Instagram is a lot of work and TikTok is even more work. So
Yeah.
I'm just
Yeah.
not ready. I'm not ready for that kind of commitment.
I still don't.
He
get it.
says while he launches his own podcast.
What I love about I Am Adoptee is that it is not me. It is a collaboration with so many other adoptees. From the front end on the back end, everything that you see on the website is created by and for us. So our designer is a is a Chinese adoptee. Our Instagram volunteer and social media volunteer is a Chinese adoptee. My assistant is a Korean adoptee, Whitney. I mean, everybody that works on it, all the contributors, all the writers are adoptees as well. So it really is formed by us.
Fantastic. Well, let's take a break, and when we come back, we will be jumping in with a food or drink item, which we will discuss about during our
break.
All right, kaja, let's go.
We are back with our food portion of the Janchi Show. We just had an amazing discussion with Joy Lieberthal Rho, and thank you again for all of that. We now get to try something that I have had before at a Korean restaurant. Patrick
really?
has never had before. I've never had it
Uh-huh.
out of a can, though, so this could be completely...
Yeah, this is a first for me too.
This could be completely good or bad, honestly. So I don't know. Have you had this, KJ?
No, I have not.
You've never had this either. Okay.
Yeah, so
Oh.
Interesting. So
curious
Joy and
about
I
it.
briefly talked before. I've had this at a Korean restaurant, but I did not know what it was called. And when she in our email responded, Sujunghwa, and I was like, what is that? And I had to go look to see if that's what it was called. So is that, since you both speak Korean and know some words, is that what that means? Sweet cinnamon punch?
I'm hoping that's what it means.
Oh.
Yeah,
I was
don't
under the
know.
impression that I'm literally pulling up a translator to type it
Okay,
in.
good.
But,
Yeah, okay.
so sujong, the version of the word, I obviously don't know the hanja with it, but the sujong means crystal, as far as I know. So I don't know if adding gua
Wa?
implies what is it?
Right, because
Gua.
dates is tetsu. And that's a date clearly on the
Yeah.
can.
Sujonggwa as a whole word means fertilization. So
Oh, okay.
birak,
Great.
bi.
I also
Nope,
would
that's
have
not
could have
word.
never
That
told you
is
what a
dot.
date looks like, and would not have known that that's what that was. Is that what you
Yeah.
said?
I'm
A
pretty
date?
sure that's a
Well,
date.
I'm curious because it's also one of the things that's in an ingredient is dried persimmons, which
Yes,
is,
that's true
which
too.
is another word that I looked up that was what is persimmon?
Kam.
Cum? Yeah, I think there was another word that I saw that was dried or something like that too.
Oh, okay.
Well, I
Right.
typed in birak sujonghwa into Google Translate. With a space, it means fertilization and without a space, it means fertilization department. So I feel like we're missing something here.
Right.
But,
Wa is an and, like, so no, it's a
Oh.
wa.
with a
No,
conjunction.
wa na.
So, anyways, the English says sweet cinnamon punch, and the French says punch de la cannelle, I think. So there's lots of languages. This is made by Paldo, Fun and Yum. Is their brand, and it's a tiny can. It
is a very tiny can.
238 milliliters for all
reminds
of
me
you
of
who
the
use the metric system. And in America, it's like a half of a normal sized can.
Yeah, it's like the ones you get on
That's
those short flights back in the day, the little mini airplanes.
Yeah.
They give you like a
right.
half can.
So as we
All
pop
right.
these open,
It says shake
for
well.
Joy and
Shake
Nathan
well.
who have drank this before, is this a bowl on the can, or is this supposed to be a cup? Do you drink this out of a cup, or do you drink it out of a bowl?
So in the restaurants I've gotten to, it's always in a little glass bowl with pine nuts on top.
Well, that makes sense. Then.
Interesting.
This is an accurate picture, I feel like.
There you go. Mine has always been in a metal cup. So
Oh,
I don't know.
do you get the pine nuts too?
No, I don't think there was any pine nuts in it.
Oh.
Yeah.
Have you had this then?
Well, so that was
So I might not have had
that
it.
was
Maybe
the only
I'm
way
actually,
that. Yeah, that was the
someone
only way that I could distinguish sujeongwa and shikke. Shikke had rice and sujeongwa had pine nuts. That's never mind that this is red and the other one was clear. But
Woo!
Well,
Yeah.
let's try it.
This smells like a can of Big Red.
The Big Red. What? I don't think it's going to be spicy cinnamon.
No,
I thought it
have
was
you
more
had-
sweet cinnamon, right?
I don't know if I like it.
Oh man,
Oh,
Matt,
yeah.
I should have tried it first, so I didn't see your face.
No, I love it. I think it's great, but I'm also a fan of cinnamon. So
Mm.
Not as
Oh,
bad
that's
as I thought
nice.
it was going to be.
it's
I thought it was going to be worse.
Yeah.
Yeah. It
To be
hits
honest.
like artificial cinnamon, but it tastes more like real cinnamon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Really confusing because I
Right,
can't
that's the-
stand artificial cinnamon flavor. Like
Right, the
Fireball
after
whiskeys
flavor.
or the hot tamales or
oh
whatever.
yeah, I hate hot
know,
tamales. And-
Yeah, like none of that. So it hits like that to me.
yeah.
But then it smooths out and is a really nice kind of cinnamon flavor. So the aftertaste is much nicer than the initial taste.
Yeah.
So it's like it keeps me coming back and then just slaps me in the face every time I drink it. So I don't know, that's where it's at.
Yeah, I
I'm
definitely
so
don't.
tempted to just put this in a bowl and drink it. The
More
idea of a
authentic.
can feels.
It does.
Should this be
less
cold?
authentic.
Are y'all drinking this cold or are you drinking
Warm.
it warm?
I refrigerated mine, so
Okay, I
Yeah,
put mine in
that's
the
smart.
fridge.
yeah.
I literally
Yeah.
just opened my box of stuff
Yeah.
that Nathan sent me, and I
Well,
received it 2 weeks
also-
ago.
It could be like a tea now. Think of it like a
Yeah,
hot
Nathan,
tea.
I think this is served in the summer, isn't it?
Yeah, it
this
is.
is more of a summer thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Is it served cold or is it served hot?
No, it's served cold.
yeah,
Okay.
I've always had ice in mine too.
Okay.
But
I feel like
I
this
think
is
it tastes
one
like a
spice level
liquid
away from
cinnamon
being
roll.
Fireball.
But yeah,
Alcoholic
liquid
beverage.
cinnamon roll. Oh, actually, yeah. If you want to
You're
mix
right.
it, throw this with a little Fireball, and you got yourself a
Yeah,
You're right.
summer
cinnamon
cocktail.
surprise.
Oh,
Yikes.
yeah.
Yikes! Yikes! Yikes!
A little
It
double
feels-
cinnamon.
It feels grainy in my mouth, so what it implies is that they like used artificial cinnamon and then like threw in a dash of cinnamon for like real flavor.
I didn't feel any
So-
texture.
I
I
don't
felt
know.
it
No,
was
you might
smooth
get the
whole way.
ginger extract. That might
Oh,
be
maybe
the
that's what it is.
that might be the texture.
Oh
Or
yeah,
the
I
dried
guess I can see
persimmon.
that
I don't know.
I don't know.
graininess now.
Sarah hasn't made up her mind yet either. She's just so,
I've always liked it, but I'm a fan of bark. So.
Wait, what?
that's not the first time you've made this joke. Wait, that joke on this show.
He's made so many jokes. I've forgotten the ones that he's now.
They're all
rehashing.
dad jokes, so yeah, I don't know.
Hilarious.
I will always be a good audience for this.
Oh, good. Well, I have a whole, I have a whole bunch more.
I'm a terrible audience for those. So.
Yeah.
I'm a
KJ
medium.
just
Patrick,
shakes
you
his head
can
at me.
Goldilocks it. Yeah.
I think KJ just
Oh,
goes,
okay,
"You're the
bye."
worst, Nathan,"
Yeah.
and I'm over here
As
just.
long as it's not my dad making the jokes, because
But
he's
no-
only got
Yeah.
he's only got 4, and then
He's only
I
got
heard them
4.
all by the time I was 4, literally, and
4.
he continued to use the same 4 jokes. So, all right,
Hmm.
well, let's get into ratings. Let's
Yeah.
get into let's go ahead and Joy, what do you think? This is your
What's
revisit.
my
How many
Between what
pine
and what?
nuts out of 5?
out of 5.
Yeah.
how many pine nuts out of 5? Okay, but I'm biased because I actually do know the flavor.
Sure.
So while I don't
think that's
love
good.
the can,
Okay.
If you had it in a
I
white,
give it a 4 for when it tastes really great and it's nice and refreshing and cold. I give it a 3 in the can though.
Okay.
hey,
Huh.
I like that.
Is
It's
it the
all
can
about delivery
specifically that moves
of
it
it
from
as
4
well.
to 3?
Yeah,
or-
I can't get past the can for some reason. It just doesn't belong. The two don't mix to me. So
All right. Just introducing
little
a lot
distracted
of
by the
unnecessary
can.
cognitive dissonance. Yeah.
I
Amazing.
Maybe
That's
I
honest.
should have picked the crackers. Yeah.
Nah, it's okay.
Crackers are crackers. Like
Pat-
Joy would be
Patrick
like,
has
well, they
rated
weren't served on a
things.
plate, so I don't like the crackers either.
Right. Patrick has rated things on the look of it as well. So,
Yeah.
you know.
I mean, it has a lot to do with it. It has a lot to do
Delivery
with
is
the
part
rating.
of the process.
Sure.
Absolutely.
Sure.
But
But
KJ, what are you giving us?
I'm gonna give this 2.5 dates out of 5. I am
2.5.
not sure if I like it or not, so it sits squarely in the middle. Like, I don't love that it slaps me with artificial cinnamon flavor. I do love that it like smooths out into like a nice cinnamon flavor. The can, I don't know, man. It's weird. And I'm drinking this on an empty stomach, which I know shouldn't affect me, but maybe it does. I'm just in a weird kind of headspace right now. So yeah, 2.5. It's good. I mean, I wouldn't be disappointed if somebody gave this to me. I would love to try the rice drink. What's it called? Shike?
Shike.
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 Okay.
Yeah. I think you would really like that one.
So I think I've said this on the show before, but I've had a rice drink that is sweet, that is good. But I was young enough that I either never heard or was never told or just don't remember what it was called. So I will know it when I taste it, but until then, I don't know. So anyways, 2.5 out of 5 from me.
Okay.
Nathan?
Well, since I've had something similar already and I knew kind of what it was going to taste like, I have to give it a high rating because I do like it.
You
I
don't
like
have
cinnamon,
to give
like
it
I said.
a high rating.
I'm going to give it a 4 because it tastes exactly how I expected it to taste. It is refreshing. I like it cold. Yeah, I'm a fan. So, and getting hit in the face with persimmons as a kid with little firecrackers in it does not dissuade me at all. So,
Wait, actually, like you got hit in the face?
That's a
someone-
memory for you?
yeah.
He
When
just casually drops that in.
persimmons. The first thing that I think of when I think of persimmons is I do think of the tree that was in front of a friend's house, and we would put little firecrackers in them when they were ripe and throw them at each other and try to time it so that they would blow up right before they hit you, and you just get a
face full of
splattering of persimmons. And so that's my memory of persimmons.
And the inside pulp is like all orange.
It
like,
is,
stuck
yeah.
on your
So
face. Oh,
I
that's
didn't
fun.
have another memory of persimmons until my wife, her grandmother had a persimmon tree, and she would dehydrate them, and we would eat them. So that was the nicer memory of persimmons. But the young memory was getting hit with them in firecrackers. So, however, I still like the taste of this, and
Nice.
yeah, 4 out of 5 for me. So
Well,
Patrick?
I'm gonna give it a 3. I would have gave it a lower rating, but it tasted better than I thought going in. I actually would have given it a 4, but I think that I think I can tell that this drink is coming from a can and that it should not originally come from one. So I think I would like to try this and revisit this in its natural form, and then I will revisit that. But a canned version, I'm gonna go with a 3. 3 dates.
I think it's like I said, it's very refreshing at the end of a nice big Korean meal, and they give it to you at the end of like a dessert almost. So, I like it. Good. Well, hey, we got a full splattering
it.
of ratings.
We got a face full of sweet cinnamon punch.
We
having
did.
flashbacks.
Well,
Sujongwa.
I mean, speaking of dinners and nice Korean meals, I think we're all getting ready to go do some sort of meal. So as we wrap up here, Joy, just for our listeners, could you share one more time where we can find you at?
Sure. You can find me at iamadoptee.org and sejongusa.org.
Amazing.
Thank you.
No, thank you, Joy. Really appreciate you being here. Yeah,
Yeah,
And,
I don't know why we're all whispering now, but
I
it's
don't
because of reverence. It's reverence.
the end of
We're
the
now in
night.
a whisper.
Thank you very much for coming on
Yeah.
the show. This is Thoughts for Your Thoughts.
As always, you can email us at janchi@justlikemedia.com. You can find us on Instagram and all the other sources at Janchi Show. And of course, After Party on Facebook. We are there and announcing more information about our Doljanchi, our gathering in August 29th in Los Angeles, K-Town. We will have it's going to be an amazing thing. I'm just going to put it there. I've seen people already
It will
talking
be
about
as
it.
good as persimmon that gets thrown at your face and then explodes in a glorious burst of orange.
I really hope you guys don't do that to me when I'm
Well, you should have never told us
Now
the
I got
story.
plans. Yeah. So
But
yeah.
you
Go
can
ahead.
get tickets for that or information, janchishow.com/live.
yes.
/live.
Yeah, you can find me at KJ Relke wherever I want to be found on the internet. I would love for someone to write in with the proper way to pronounce persimmons, because as we've been talking about it, all I can think about is that bit in Kim's Convenience. So someone talk to me about it.
While you're trying to talk to that about wait, what? Okay. Anyways, you can find me at Patrick in the World on Instagram, at Parmesan Strong on Twitter, and you can also find resources on this website I created, patrickintheworld.me.
I'm never gonna stop laughing at your Twitter handle.
The people voted.
You can find me now. I'm on Instagram as nnowalk. So I am switching over to that now instead of my photography one. We'll make it more personal. So join me nnowalk on Instagram, and thank you all for being here, Joy and the listeners and everybody.
Yep. We'll see you next week. Janchi Heyo.
Bye.
Cut the clip. Hey, everybody. Before I let you go, I wanted to jump on and say just a few words about what the show has meant to me over the past year. When this comes out, we'll be a few days away from meeting in LA for the first time, KJ, Nathan, Jerry, and I, and I'm really, really looking forward to that. And it's very much a full circle moment because this episode is also number 53. And so in a week's time, it would be around that 1 year anniversary. But for me, I subscribe to the 52, the number 52 being a way to describe the weeks in a year. So 53 for me is the start of year 2 of the Janchi Show. And first wanted to thank all of our guests who have come on, because doing the show has really made me understand the importance of and the privilege of being able to share another adoptee story, especially on this platform. It's a privilege because for someone to come onto our show and not only share their story, but to share the intimate details of their lives and their experiences as adoptees it's really incredible that we have had that opportunity to be able to do that, and that people allow us and give us the opportunity to do that. I also want to thank everybody that's been listening to the show. I about said watching the show. Everybody that's been listening to the show and following us for the past year and supporting us and engaging with us. The community that has grown out of this show has been really incredible, and we're about to see that reflected in reality, in real life, in person here this weekend. So thank you so much for being foundational to the show and the growth of the show and what we're hoping to do for years to come. And last but not least, I just have to thank KJ and Nathan and Jerry. So KJ and Nathan for going on this journey with me and for walking with me through my progression as an adoptee, through the development of language and being able to articulate my lived experience over this past year, and for being patient enough with me to do that. And then to Jerry for having the audacity to think that this is something that could work, and then seeing us through to this point. You know, if you asked me 1.3 years ago, what if I ever would have even thought about doing a podcast, I would have said, yeah, I'm thinking about doing a podcast, but never like this, never in this way, and never to a point that it literally changes my life. So Jerry, thank you for giving me that opportunity, for giving us this opportunity. And I'm really excited for what's to come. So I'm going to stop talking now, but I just wanted to come on here and say thank you to everyone. This show has meant the world to me. As I said, it's changed my life. And I'm really looking forward to what we're able to do here in the next 52. So can't wait to see everyone in LA. Can't wait to continue engaging with you. Can't wait to continue sharing my story and sharing all of your stories here on the Janchi Show. Heyo.